Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is on the really intense tempo of top-level U.S.-China diplomacy. Specifically, we're looking at the context and the implications of President Trump's confirmed April 2026 visit to Beijing.
And this flurry of activity, it really crystallizes a fundamental tension in foreign policy right now. We have to ask the core question: is this commitment to frequent, direct presidential engagement the right mechanism to manage immediate geopolitical risks and, secure tangible short-term interests?
Exactly. Or is this very high-visibility approach inadvertently conceding vital long-term strategic ground to Beijing?
Right.
I argue firmly for the former. I think direct operational level engagement at the presidential tier is really the essential defense against immediate crisis escalation. Frankly, it's the only reliable way to secure concrete short-term policy wins. It's an investment in operational stability.
And I come at it from a different angle. I think prioritizing tactical stability through what could be 4 highly publicized meetings in a single year, well, it risks legitimizing Beijing's positions, especially on core strategic disagreements. And it fundamentally undermines our grand strategic objectives in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, so to establish the terrain here, the factual timeline really matters. On January 9th, the president confirmed his April plan. This follows a high-stakes phone call on November 24th of 2025 with Chairman Xi. And this wasn't a standard check-in. It was a comprehensive exchange that happened immediately before they scheduled the state visit.
And that November discussion, it confirms just how comprehensive and, frankly, how ambitious the immediate agenda is. They covered the status of Taiwan, the conflict in Ukraine, the fentanyl crisis, and, of course, commitments to U.S. agricultural products. I mean, it's an enormous scope for a single conversation. It really indicates the breadth of operational concerns that Washington felt needed immediate high-level attention.
And the predicted frequency elevates this beyond just standard diplomacy. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's statement suggests a distinct possibility of up to 4 leader-level engagements in 2026. You have the confirmed April visit, a reciprocal state visit later in the U.S., and then crucial sidelines meetings at the G20 in Doral, Florida, and APEC in Shenzhen. 4 high-stakes meetings in 12 months, that's just an unprecedented operational tempo for competing powers.
That tempo is immense, yes, but we have to dissect the content alongside the frequency. In those preceding discussions, Chairman Xi forcefully reiterated Beijing's long-standing position on Taiwan, framing its eventual return as an important part of the post-World War II international order. Now, that is a highly sophisticated strategic claim. It's designed to appeal to international legal precedent, historical context. Yet, immediately after receiving that firm message, the president characterized the overall relationship as extremely robust. That disconnect between profound ideological difference and diplomatic cordiality, that is the strategic tension we really have to analyze.
Well, from an operational standpoint, this frequency is the mechanism for short-term stability. Let's focus on crisis deconfliction, the real hard power management challenge. When we look at flashpoints like the Taiwan Strait or the indirect involvement in Ukraine, continuous direct dialogue is the most effective tactical tool available to prevent a sudden military miscalculation.
That's a valid point about the necessity of a safety valve, but I would challenge where the true deconfliction actually occurs. The established military-to-military channels are designed to prevent an accidental collision or miscommunication between, say, a pilot and a destroyer captain. How does a phone call between heads of state, often dealing with broad strokes, prevent a mid-level drone operator's misstep in the South China Sea, or manage the complex logistical friction points inherent in these hot zones?
Because the presidential channel is the final safety valve, not the first. It's the mechanism that ensures when a tactical incident does occur, let's say an unforeseen kinetic event, the two powers can immediately, without any bureaucratic delay, step back from the brink of strategic failure. This high frequency guarantees the channel is warmed up, functional, and resilient under stress. This capability to de-escalate swiftly buys us essential time and minimizes the immediate risk profile, which is paramount when you're assessing the probability of a major conflict.
I see the tactical advantage of minimizing immediate risk. I do. However, the other stated focus is securing measurable interests, fentanyl cooperation, agricultural sales.
While these are tangible deliverables, I'm concerned we're treating these periphery concessions as high-value strategic returns. Are we really spending the president's diplomatic capital to achieve outcomes that, frankly, should be managed by cabinet secretaries?
I don't see them as periphery. They are immediate policy deliverables impacting millions of Americans. Fentanyl directly correlates to domestic security. It requires coordinated law enforcement and intelligence sharing protocols that really only a top-down mandate can enforce effectively. And agriculture sales stabilize a key U.S. economic sector. That's an immediate, verifiable economic interest. The transactional nature justifies the investment of high-level time. If the president can secure a significant agricultural commitment, that is a verifiable short-term win that demonstrates the functional utility of the relationship, regardless of the underlying strategic conflicts.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. This constant, high-level interaction creates an enormous domestic and international expectation for substantive resolution on the core disputes. Can the administration realistically sustain 4 high-stakes meetings per year while only achieving agreement on periphery issues like commodity sales? The high frequency risks exposing the channel's fundamental limits on structural conflicts, like Taiwan sovereignty, which cannot be resolved through pleasant phone calls or trade deals. It sets the U.S. up for strategic disappointment.
But if we refuse to engage because the structural issues are too large, we sacrifice the leverage we have on immediate operational issues. Furthermore, maintaining this channel, even if it's only for transactional outcomes, ensures Beijing's actions remain broadly predictable in the short term. And predictability is the cornerstone of any great power operational assessment. We have to prioritize certainty and risk mitigation in the next 12 months, even if we accept ambiguity in the next decade.
Predictability at what strategic cost? We must be careful not to confuse transactional success with fundamental strategic progress. You may win the negotiation on soybeans, but you simultaneously legitimize the strategic context in which Beijing operates. When Chairman Xi frames the claim on Taiwan directly within the post-World War II international order, citing historical agreements like the Cairo Declaration to argue for legitimacy, and the U.S. response is simply scheduling another very harmonious summit, we risk ceding foundational ground by implicitly accepting the premise of their strategic narrative.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because the cost of operational failure, a sudden, unmanaged escalation in the Taiwan Strait that triggers a regional conflict, is existential. We were talking about preventing global catastrophe. This is where the operational analysis has to lead. If scheduling 4 meetings buys us a year of predictability and crisis avoidance, that is a strategic necessity, not a diplomatic concession.
That sounds exactly like a strategy of buying down immediate operational risk by paying a high strategic price, sacrificing long-term leverage and diplomatic standing. It reminds me very strongly of periods of détente during the Cold War. You had high-level personal diplomacy aimed at stability, which temporarily masked but ultimately just deferred fundamental ideological and strategic misalignment. We risk trading long-term alignment for short-term diplomatic ease.
I would argue that the frequency of these meetings is precisely about establishing a functional, resilient channel that prevents us from falling into that old pattern of miscommunication. It is preventative diplomacy acting as a form of hard power insurance. It's an investment in minimizing the risk profile, allowing us to manage friction without defaulting to crisis mode. It ensures we have a dedicated line to the ultimate decision maker, something that cannot be overestimated in military operational terms.
That's a compelling argument for maximizing operational safety, but we absolutely must consider the strategic cost to our regional alliances. When Washington commits to this intense, bilateral engagement, up to 4 meetings, 2 state visits, what signal does this send to key partners like Japan, the Philippines, Australia?
Our primary focus has to be on stabilizing the core relationship first.
But this bilateral prioritization suggests that our allies' sovereignty and regional security concerns are secondary to the immediate Washington-Beijing dynamic. For our partners, the perception of abandonment or irrelevance is a major driver of policy. If we spend all our time on transactional diplomacy with Beijing, we risk pushing them toward hedge strategies, investing in their own security apparatuses, diversifying their diplomatic portfolio,
And that ultimately weakens the collective multilateral strategic position that the U.S. relies upon to counter China's regional influence.
Alliance management is crucial, yes, but foundational stability between the two primary global powers is simply non-negotiable. If the U.S.-China relationship destabilizes and spills over into conflict, our allies suffer immediate, severe economic and security fallout regardless of our rhetorical support. We have to stabilize the operational environment first. Only then can we effectively coordinate a comprehensive strategic front with our partners in a stable environment.
Perhaps. But stabilization achieved purely through high-profile personal chemistry might mask underlying strategic drift and obfuscate the long-term goal. We need to look beyond the immediate photo ops and focus on what systemic gains Beijing achieves from the global optics of such frequent, bilateral, and seemingly harmonious engagement. It normalizes their rising status as the co-equal manager of global affairs, often at the expense of our coalition.
Looking forward, say, 6 months post-April 2026, the operational outlook suggests a predictable path forward.
And what is your most likely case for the next half year?
Well, the most likely case is that the April summit will yield concrete, highly visible agreements, new fentanyl enforcement protocols, maybe significant new trade deals, successfully maintaining the facade of an extremely robust relationship. Operational channels stay stable, even if core disagreements over Taiwan and Ukraine policy remain functionally unchanged. The best case, operationally, would be if this momentum generates a tangible, coordinated diplomatic effort that leads to a verifiable stabilization or reduction in external support for the conflict in Ukraine. That would demonstrate a real shared capability for global governance in a high-stakes environment.
From a strategic outlook, my primary concern centers on the worst-case scenario over the remainder of 2026. Especially regarding the multilateral platforms like the G20 and APEC. Beijing is remarkably adept at leveraging these environments.
How so?
They could strategically deploy the positive optics generated by multiple presidential summits to solidify their diplomatic position globally. By using the appearance of U.S. bilateral favor showing that Washington prioritized them 4 times in a single year, they could systematically isolate U.S. allies on sensitive trade or sovereignty issues, subtly undermining the entire U.S.-led regional security architecture.
So the fundamental tension we've discussed remains. The immediate, measurable, operational benefits of stability versus the long-term systemic risks inherent in validating the current strategic structure through constant high-level interaction. The key question is whether tactical success can genuinely translate into enduring strategic advantage.
Absolutely. We have to continue to watch how they utilize this high-frequency access to deploy their economic and diplomatic capital. The frequency of the meetings itself has become a strategic asset for Beijing.
So we are left with 2 fundamentally opposed interpretations of this diplomatic tempo: a necessary stability mechanism to manage catastrophic risks
Versus a strategic concession that legitimizing opposing views and defers conflict rather than resolving it. I maintain that without a clear articulation of what foundational strategic ground we are holding, these tactical victories just become short-lived and hollow. They merely lend credibility to Beijing's claims regarding the post-WW2 order and allow them to dictate the terms of engagement.
And I maintain the frequency of presidential communication is an irreplaceable piece of hard power insurance. The outcomes of the subsequent planned meetings, the reciprocal state visit, and the multilateral gatherings in Doral and Shenzhen will be critical for a full appreciation of whether this operational tempo can serve a greater strategic purpose or if it simply buys time on a deteriorating clock.
Indeed. The next 6 months will be highly instructive in showing whether this transactionality leads to true strategic progress or just sophisticated high-level friction management.